GNT show is intended for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. These are the voyages of the GNT show. Our continuing mission to explore Star Trek storytelling, to seek out new worlds and interesting characters, to bowl we got where no show has gone before. Live long and prosper, bitches.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. And to all the ships at sea, this is a GNT supplemental log. This is a real special one. I have to give all the credit to Mike. I said in passing, never thinking it would happen, see if we could interview our guest tonight, and here we are. I'm just going to throw a couple of series and movies at you before I introduce them. Space Above and Beyond, vastly underrated show. Millennium, Babylon 5, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Millennium, The X-Files, the Sarah Silverman program, which we're going to talk about, and Star Trek Voyager, and Star Trek Enterprise. Us being Star Trek fans, that is huge, especially if you saw Season 3 of Enterprise. It is my great honor to introduce, and I hope he understands why I call him a brother when I say this, airborne all the way, sir, Mr. Tucker Smallwood.
Well, thank you, Mike. Airborne back at you. I hope I can live up to your advanced billing.
Yeah, I just graduated from, I graduated. Oh,
I was going to say, you graduated from what?
I just retired from 28 years in the Army. A great deal of that was in the 82nd, but you and I chewed the same pits in Fort Benning, so...
Well, I probably did a few more push-ups than you because I was a second lieutenant. What was your rank?
Actually, I was an NCO at the time, so they took great pride, and I was the only active duty member in my chalk. Everybody else was an ROTC cadet. So when they screwed up, I got punished.
Yes, indeed. There's nothing a jump NCO enjoys better than dropping someone who outranks him.
and you can understand this when I say, yes, Sergeant Airborne.
Those are fond memories, but they are, in fact, memories.
Yeah, and my knees remember them very well.
Oh, yes. Well, interestingly enough, at least to me, I had damaged knees from playing for the University of Maryland football team in 1966 before I graduated. And I was what was called 1Y, which was a classification said that you were medically unfit. However, by the summer of 1967, the need was so desperate that they called me in for a pre-induction physical, and the doctor said, "My God, your knee clicks every time you flex it." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "But you can still walk, can't you?" I said, "Well, sure." He said, "Okay, you let us know if you have any trouble." And the next thing I knew, I was on a bus to North Carolina and basic training at Fort Bragg.
Cool. Best place in the Army. So you're a Terrapin.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am a Terp, and I take great pride whenever we are successful on the field, which is not so often. But, you know, it's lost a lot of its shine because we're no longer in the ACC, and that was very, very important.
Mm-hmm. See, I live in Maryland.
The ACC was integrated 2 years before I got to the University of Maryland, and 1 year the basketball team. So this was a fairly new, I won't call it a social experiment. How about we call it social justice? But in any case, that was a very real dynamic, the racism in this country at that time in our history.
Yeah, I live in Maryland, so yeah, that's fine. I'm Nick. I live in Maryland. Mike, our producer, lives in California. Terry, my co-host, lives in New Mexico. And Janet, she's our lawyer. No. She's in Massachusetts. So the show is all around the country.
It is absolutely bicoastal or multicoastal.
Sir,
Yes.
It is a pleasure to have you. And the first thing I want to touch on is you studied under Stella Adler. Please tell us about that, because Terry, Janet, and I know what that is and what that means, but I'm betting a vast majority of our audience do not know the names Stella Adler or Lee Strasberg or those names. So if you can tell our audience what that meant for you.
Well, most of you possibly have heard of Stanislavski and the method. And there were three American disciples of his process, and they were Lee Strasberg, Stella Adler, and Sanford Meisner. I resigned my commission in September of 1970 to come to New York to study with Sanford Meisner. I wasn't expected to live very long. I didn't really have any huge futuristic plans. However, I had been a television director for NBC before I was drafted at WBAL in Baltimore, Maryland. That was the NBC affiliate, as I recall. And I was their first director of color in their history. When I was drafted, I went off to war, and since the doctors had little expectation of me getting into my 40s, or my 30s for that matter, I decided I would use what time I had left to become a better director. I knew technical things. I didn't really have any concept of the process of acting and creating a character, and I thought this would make me a better director. And the truth is, I fell in love with the process. I had been pretty emotionally shut down during my time as a commander in war. Emotions are not particularly useful in some contexts, and that was one. And studying this process put me back in touch with my humanity. Doctors brought me back to life on September 14th, but I really feel I became a living human being under the tutelage of Sandy Meisner. Once I had access to my emotions and I learned how to use them to enrich my work, I realized I never want to give those up ever again. It may make me vulnerable. I can be hurt by people being unkind to me, but I can recover from that. And they, to me, are the true mark of what it is to be human. Now, Sandy was very kind to me. He was very patient with me. He would say, "You watch yourself when you work. Why do you do that?" And I told him, "Well, I'm afraid I might hurt somebody." And he laughed, and "We're not going to let you hurt anybody." And he has really no idea what I was capable of. But he taught me that I could trust myself. And I think I broke a table or damaged the church in my time there, but I was always appropriate with my fellow artists, and that was very important to me because I'm a very passionate person. Now, midway through my second year, Jeff Goldblum and I got kicked out of the Playhouse. He got a play, and I got a soap opera.
What?
The rules then were you're not allowed to study and work. And I was living on the GI Bill in the Lower East Side amidst smack addicts and crime, and I didn't really want to buy a gun. I really didn't want to shoot anyone else. And I got out of there and went to Soho, which really was at the time just a place of empty lofts, and it was a wonderful way to live in New York. But I went on and began making $400 a day as an actor in a soap opera, and I didn't look back. A year or two after that, I was put in contact with a couple of dear friends I had met at the Playhouse who were very close to Stella, and she accepted me as a student at her classes. There was a time when I was doing the soap early in the morning. I would take a character class with Stella in between, and then I did Shakespeare for Joe Papp in repertory, Julius Caesar and Coriolanus.
Oh, my God. Wow.
So it was a wonderfully rich creative time in my life. It was very exciting. I cherish many things from Stella. Having looked back at books over the years, I realized I still do the right things instinctively, but by reading the books, I remember why I do them. Mm-hmm. But Stella gave me very strong guidance in terms of my obligations as an artist. I owe entire total fealty to my director, and then to my playwright. And then, if there's anything left, she said, that I can have. And I was always slavishly devoted to that guidance, sometimes to my own disadvantage. Not every director has integrity. Not every director is as talented. And so there were times when I would twist myself into knots trying to satisfy demands that were unaccomplishable. I think I just made up a new word.
we'll let her go. Yes.
But both Stella and Sandy loved men. And they both loved me. So they were very kind and generous to me. However, there were others who did not enjoy their favor, and I saw them both be very, very cruel to people during my time with them.
Now, you were in New York doing all that during, because I was young, but I remember it, and I know Janet remember a very exciting time of change, and it was not. It was so different than people that would go to New York City now would know.
Oh, yes. Worlds apart. It was a very exciting time in theater. I think Joe Papp was one of the reasons it was so exciting. What he did at the Public Theater to create multicultural casting, for example, the work that he did in the park. Many of the people who were mainstays in your artistic life are people that were beginning then. He could use the profits from a show like Two Gentlemen of Verona or a Course Line to produce theater that was not commercially viable, but it was important artistically. And he could subsidize and underwrite. And it didn't hurt that he had a huge complex that he leased from the city for $1 a year.
Wow. I have to do this. I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you give us one of your favorite readings of Shakespeare that you just know?
Boy, you really have put me on the spot.
He does that, sorry. If you want me to put a leash on him, I will.
No, people should not be leashed. What comes to mind? I mean, I'm very fond of Julius Caesar. I'm fond of Coriolanus. I'm not one of those. I mean, I could sit down and rip out Antony's funeral oratory. I'd be self-conscious as I do it, both worrying about text and pushing and all the rest of that. But I'm searching, hoping that an aphoristic quote will fly into my mind. I'll tell you what, why don't you press on, and at some point I'm going to interrupt you with a total non sequitur.
Okay, that's wonderful.
That'll work.
Now, you were in The Cotton Club, which is, I think, one of the underrated movies of the 80s, and an important movie. Can you talk about that?
Well, Francis shot a 4-hour movie, and only 2 hours of it exist on screen. And that's a shame, because there were many, many talented musicians and singers and dancers who worked for weeks on that film who never show up in the final cut. And my biggest question has always been, where is that footage? Francis was a hired gun in this instance. We had first met in the middle 70s when I was out here, and we sat down for about an hour. And he was working on Apocalypse Now, and we talked about my experiences in the jungle. And Stella was very, 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 very clear about this. You cannot do this movie. You cannot, you must not. You will come completely undone. And she was absolutely right. I had no idea what was lurking in my psyche in the back. Wow. But in any case, he remembered me. And when this film came around, I had become very good friends with Gregory Hines. We had been in the very first theater production he'd ever done, starring Della Reese, called The Last
cry when I think
Show.
about him. I know.
Tap. I think Tap is one of the great movies nobody knows.
It is a wonderful piece of film, and he was a wonderful artist. Greg was fascinated by the fact that I played the angry young man in this play, and in the middle of the second act, I had an impassioned exchange with Della Reese, and then I quit my job because I felt what we were doing in blackface was demeaning to my people. And I would break down every night, and he was fascinated by that. How do you do that, Tucker? I mean, it's within a word or so. And I explained to him the process that I had learned from Sandy and from Stella about how you prepare a character and give him a background. And a couple of years later, I can remember Greg calling me with great excitement, Tuck, I'm in the morgue. I'm at the morgue. And I'm down here, and I'm doing this stuff, and I'm working with a coroner, and I'm working with this. He was preparing for Wolfen. Greg became a wonderful actor.
Wolfen!
He was always a great performer, but became a wonderful actor.
Oh, I was just talking to somebody about him last week because they had never seen the Running Scared, the movie he did with Billy Crystal.
Billy Crystal,
and
yes.
Hilarious.
He was a singular spirit. And as I say, we had become good friends. I spent almost 6 months on that film. It was one of the happier times in my life. And my life existed in the Cotton Club. I was the maitre d' of the Cotton Club. But because this was not an instance in which Francis owned the property, but was a hired gun, the suits, you can call them the suits, the mob. I don't know what you want to. I'm going to try to be very, very careful. It was an amazing time because every weekend, every big star in Hollywood was appearing at our parties because we had some of the most beautiful women in the world. And so John Savage and Robin Williams and Chris Walken and on and on and on. We're always there over the weekends, and Chris Walken and I would always go out and get stoned together. But I had met Chris years before. At the Public, I was doing the Public Theater had, I think, 5 theaters at least in this one building, and on one floor there were 3 theaters with a common green room in the center. And I would leave between my scenes and the play I was performing. I would go stand in the wings and watch Chris do Kid Champion because his choices were so specific and unique, and he always committed to them. And I just found him an incredibly engaging and charismatic performer live. He was just stunning live. And we continued to encounter each other through the years until finally he and Matthew Broderick and I did a scene from Pablo Hummel in front of 1,000 people at a theater in New York for a huge benefit funded by Absolute Vodka. It was a very special time, but I could sit and watch Chris read the telephone book and be absolutely entranced.
Ever since you said getting stoned, I'm trying to picture Christopher Walken stoned talking, and I can't. My mind does not wrap around that.
Like one syllable every hour.
Terry, Jen, Mike, one of you has to take over because I could ask a million questions of Mr. Smallwood.
Absolutely. No, you go ahead, Nick, because I think the questions that you've got, we say
are fantastic.
Absolutely. You go for it.
See, they're just stunned, sir, because one, I'm calling you sir, and two, because I prepared for this interview.
You did prepare
because I was that excited.
We are all big
We are
fans.
huge fans. So you go for it, Nick. You've got the questions, and I love what you're going to ask, so that's great.
Wait, which one? Oh, well, which one? Now, by the way, I want to let our audience know, Mr. Smallwood is helping us celebrate the summer of George. That's all I'm going to say.
You know, it's stunning. I've done a lot of work on TV, but those residuals continue to be among the richest.
Seinfeld is huge still, isn't it?
Well, it is huge, and I did 3 episodes, but even so, a number of the other shows I did were very, very large as well, but these seem to get incredibly play, and I hope they go on into perpetuity. But I had mentioned earlier about that footage. The point is, I think we shot for... We filmed we improvised and filmed for 3 weeks before we shot a single frame of film on the Cotton Club. And at that time, Nicolas Cage's wife was played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. Mm-hmm. And we were having a wonderful time. The improvs were great. Fred Gwynn and Bob Hoskins were captivating. You just wanted to sit and watch them work. And Francis had all of the state-of-the-art equipment. He was using blue screen and green screen. He had what was called the Silverfish, this silver Airstream trailer where he would disappear, and Sony had given him all of these toys. But the suits were messing with him. And so we began filming it, and they would come in late in the evenings and, you know, sort of lean on him, and their presence was onerous and oppressive. And so Francis simply left the project and flew to England, and we shut down. And there was, you know, of course, concern because this is this huge project. It was at the time the most expensive film ever made. And finally he extracted he had shot enough footage so that it would be very, very expensive to replace him, but not so much that, you know, he couldn't press on. He resolved his issues with it, and he came back. We loved Francis. The people involved, the creative people involved with him. I mean, he is a very lovable man. He is such a supportive presence. I can remember he making me gnocchi at the Sherry Netherlands Netherlands for breakfast. He and his wife are just wonderfully gracious, kind people. I have pictures of Sophia running around with Darla, Greg Kine's daughter. They were both about 8 or so. The kids. And let's remember that Nicholas and Diane Lane, they were like 17, 18 years old. They were all very, very young, and there was this, they had this wonderful mixture of old pros like Fred Gwynn and Bob Hoskins and so many others, and these young, talented artists that were getting a chance to step out. However, the film that was finally cut and distributed became The Godfather Goes to Harlem. The backers or the suits did not trust the musical story, and that's a shame because it was singular. And what breaks my heart is that footage has never resurfaced. Right. In the past, you can have a look at Godfather 1 or 2, and there's unused footage from editing process that could be added to those looks back at the production. Yet none of that footage has ever resurfaced. I don't know even if it still exists.
That's a shame.
And it really is a shame.
Now, I think this is the question Terry knows that I was going to ask you about. Okay, so about, I think it was Memorial Day weekend, there was an X-Files marathon on. I had not seen the episode Home since its first run because it was that creepy. And we had been talking about you on our show. That's kind of the reason, because Janet had mentioned that you were an Army veteran, and I didn't know that. And long story short, you were in one of the creepiest X-Files ever. And you were also in Millennium. So can you talk about your X-Files experience and also working with Chris Carter, who for a while, the 90s, early to mid-90s, he kind of had a real hold on television.
I think that's quite accurate. And I didn't, in fact, work directly with Chris. However, he has called that episode the single most notorious episode of the series.
Yep.
It was written by Glenn Morgan and Jim Wong, who were the creators and writers and producers of the Space Above and Beyond.
Right.
And our relationship was a very fruitful one, and one that is one of my very favorites in my career. It was the character of Glenn Van Ross was essentially Tucker Smallwood 25 years later. His values were very, very strongly the same. And the two of them were such secure artists and creative forces, they were willing to collaborate. In my experience in the 45 years I've been doing this, I find the most generous and collaborative creative people are the ones that are also the most secure. The ones that are less secure are less willing to appear indecisive or uncertain, and so they are less willing to accept input. But Glenn and Jim were wonderfully giving. I'll give you an example. There was an instance when I was sitting here and I received a script that had me sitting in my stateroom drinking single malt scotch, and I wrote them back an email. This was in the early days of email, at least for me, saying I don't really drink single malt scotch. I know of it, and I know it's going to be tea no matter what we call it. But, I've been drinking rum since college, and Navy men of old drank grog, which is rum and water. And I said I've been playing country blues for decades, and about 3 hours later, a script was delivered to my home, and it had me sitting in my quarters with a tumbler of rum and playing Delta blues. That's a rather unique relationship when creators. I really had no huge track record as a lead. This was my first relationship in that series. It went from guest star to special guest star to Ann Tucker Smallwood to series regular, and that all happened in the space of a single season. So I will always cherish our relationship, and I'm looking forward to a reunion happening out here in August, the 20th anniversary of what it was that we did. It was very special.
It was.
Game of Thrones is now on HBO, and they have an event afterwards where people can get online and speak interactively and discuss the show. Mm-hmm. You're aware of that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think that's really neat, but we created that 20 years ago.
That's right.
Because space was all over the place because of unique circumstances with Fox, who had also gotten an NFL contract. So there were times when games would run long, and that meant the East Coast feed would be preempted. And so it would come on some nights, Sunday nights, some nights Friday nights, some nights Saturday nights. People had to chase all over to find it. But when the shows did air, immediately afterwards, we were able to go on IRC, and there was a worldwide interactive discussion. And I was new to the internet. I remember being told in my dressing room, Tucker, there's like 500 fan letters. I said, where? On the internet, in the green, on the where? Okay, where is that? Well, how do I get there? Well, you got to get a computer, man, and you got to have an account. And so AOL gave us all accounts.
Yeah.
And to this day, I have an AOL account. I'm pretty loyal. I can afford 50. I don't care what an old fart it makes me sound like. I am an old fart.
You're not the only one, Mr. Smallwood.
I still have one, too.
I still have one.
I have no patience with saying, I changed my email this week. Now it's Gmail. Now it's no, I'm comfortable on AOL. It works for me. So the point is, when one of us in the cast would get on and interact with the fan, it was very special for them. And they were appreciative, and they explained to me, no, you don't want to type in capitals because that means you're shouting, okay? And I slowly learned about the different kinds of slang, and I learned about slag, and I learned about all these different strange terms. What is this? What is the fan fiction that is pornographic?
Slash.
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 That's right. I read some stories that still make me giggle. The imagination. The perverse imaginations of some of these fans is beyond belief.
Thank you very much. I am so glad that you're Courtney, so,
We write slash.
We do. That's awesome.
So the X-Files we were talking about, I remember taking the script to there was a pizza place here that I was fond of, Pizzeria Uno, that's no longer here. It's Chicago deep dish pizza. But I'm sitting there waiting for my pizza, and the young hostess said, you all right? Because every now and then I was, oh, God, and I was apparently doing this out loud, but I'm reading through the script and what they're going to do to me. And it was just terrific. And I knew Jim and Glenn were fond of me, but I said, this is ungodly. And so when I did finally get to Vancouver and began shooting it, we shot my death scene that first night. And, yes, can you do these things, Tucker? Well, I'm a paratrooper, I know how to do a PLF, and blah, blah, blah. And so, of course, I'm with the bad guys, and they're throwing me about. And suddenly I go down, and I forgot to tuck my chin, and so my head bounced off that concrete floor, and I'm sort of laying there stunned, and I said, when you shoot my point of view, defocus the camera, because I'm seeing 3 of everything right now. There was a moment when the camera dolly ran over my foot, and I said, Jesus, this is hard work. But we finished the scenes, and the next day, the producer of the producer of the show, my gosh, I'm blocking now, not Glenn. Who is the overall head of the X-Files?
Chris Carter.
Chris Carter.
Silence. Chris Carter. Chris fired the DP, and the problem was that this DP was not comfortable shooting in the kind of low light that Chris wanted, because it becomes more ambiguous the darker it is. So I had to remain in Vancouver an extra week to reshoot my death scenes with the new DP. And when we finally did shoot them and they aired, many people reported they saw a moment when my brain splattered. And the truth of it is, when I finally gave up the ghost and let my hand fall back, it fell into a pool of blood, and that spattered.
Oh.
But because it's so dark, your imagination takes over. And so that's just the key as to when you're trying to do really scary stuff. He said, Tucker, your work was great, but the bad guys look like Shirley Temple. They were just lit too well. So I understand it. I'm proud of the show. I know how controversial it was, because after its airing, Fox vowed it would never ever air it again in prime time because the switchboard just went ballistic. However, they started selling it the next week. But when FX came along, when they got their farm teams as cable was expanding, it became the most requested episode during these annual marathons around Thanksgiving, I think it was. And as much as anything, because it was unavailable otherwise. And people had heard about it, and they couldn't believe it was as horrible as it was.
Oh, it was.
And it was pretty horrible.
For those that don't know, we'll just say it's hillbillies and incest, and Mulder and Scully are investigating. I have to ask, was your character, Andy Taylor, is that like an in-joke about Andy of Maybury?
Well, it was absolutely about Andy. I mean, it was an in-joke in the episode itself. The deputy's name, Scully and Mulder goofed on it. And, it was about riffing on this, everything is nice here, nothing bad ever happens here. This is this nice place, home. I live here. I want to stay here. I don't want this place to change. But that was the flaw in my decision not to be armed. I didn't want to be the kind of guy that kept a weapon. There was a scene where I thought about keeping my gun handy, and we'll put that away. This is home. Everything is cool here. Well, now your wife and you are basket cases and will not be recurring because of that poor decision.
Now, 2 years later, you would do your first Star Trek on Star Trek Voyager. Now, our opinions of Voyager on this show range from it just ranges, but this is an episode.
As do many fans' opinions about Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Everyone has a favorite series.
You were Enterprise fans, but we'll get to that. But you were on In the Flesh, which I always loved because one, Ray Walston was on it. Mm-hmm. Two, Kate Vernon was on it, and I've had a crush on her for probably 100 years.
She's a lovely woman.
And so, now, had you always wanted to do Star Trek? I mean, were you a fan?
Interestingly enough, this was autumn of '98, and I lost my father on New Year's Day of '98, and I really struggled with that. I went to England about 4 or 5 weeks later for a convention, and while I was there, I was told that I was going before the network for the character in this new pilot. The producer and the writer very much wanted me. He was very taken with my work on space. The director had someone else in mind, and the director gave me a task that was impossible. But because of my training, I tried to satisfy his demands, and I ended up betraying myself. I came home, I tried, it was not doable, I didn't show very well, and I was rather disgusted with myself and took a long time to forgive myself. And I woke up a couple days later and I spat into the sink after rinsing out my mouth, and I missed the sink. I had contracted Bell's palsy.
Oh, no.
And so for 5 or so months, I didn't go out, and I looked pretty wretched. People were very kind to me during that time because I had been a public figure for decades because of my work in New York for many years, and I looked as though I'd had a stroke. That meant that I wasn't going to be able to work, but late in the summer, my agents called and said, Tucker, Star Trek is called, and I got very excited. Oh, my God, I could do an alien. I can speak fine. I just look like shit. And so they said, well, no, because he's an alien that's disguised as a human being. And I said, oh, fuck, okay. All right, I'll go in for it, but, don't have any high hopes. And by God, they cast me, and people looked at the show, and they said, you were so stern and implacable. And I said, that's the only expression I had. The truth is, only half of my face functioned at that point. So I didn't try to smile because only half my face would smile. I put that expression on, and it remained there. I really enjoyed working with Ray. It was one of the last jobs he did. He was an incredibly sweet and generous man. I have a picture of us together. It's not a very good one because Ray then had cataracts, and flashes were very painful to his eyes. But as we all get older in this profession, things become more difficult, and we find that we have to get our scenes in relatively early in the day because once we hit the wall, that's pretty much about it.
Understandable.
But it was an encouraging experience. Shot at a very otherworldly place out here, about 10 minutes from my home, in the Japanese Gardens and the San Fernando Valley. I shot Biodome there, I shot Voyager there, and I shot something else there. It is a place that looks like it exists somewhere else in the future.
Wow. And then you would, a couple of years later, wind up with, I think, 9 episodes of Star Trek Enterprise as the Xindi Primate Counselor, or Conciliator, and you will find this show, we like Enterprise. We are fans of Enterprise.
We're huge fans of Enterprise.
Particularly seasons 3 and 4.
Yes.
It kind of lost its way in season 2, but season 3 turned it around in a big way. That was an amazing arc, a season-long arc, and your character was a big part of that.
That was a really interesting experience because I'm a big fan of Scott Bakula. This is my 3rd time working with him. I just think he's a great person and a wonderful leader. And leaders invariably set the tone on any series. The series with Kelsey Grammer was very special. Because I'm sorry?
Frasier.
Yes, because it was a very theatrical context. We were all peers, and whether you were a series regular or a guest star, we were all peers. And that is not always so when you go to one of these hit series and you have a resident cast. Not all are as embracing or as welcoming or supportive as others. But Kelsey Grammer was one such leader, and Scott Bakula is another. This was an unusual series for Trek in that there was no Bible. Invariably, there's a very extensive book on the culture and language and social mores and history of any alien species. And in this case, that had not been created for the Xindi. 6 of us in the species, 1 of which is extinct, 2 of which are CGI. But in any case, we had the opportunity to create our culture. And so the 4 of us, Rick Worthy and Randy Oglesby and Scott McDonald, and I would sit around because we spent 2 hours of makeup every morning and an hour and a half at night getting it taken off. So these were long days, and we had lots of time between the shoots. And so, as things would come up in the script, and we'd say, well, what's our background here? How do we feel about this, and why do we feel that way? And we had great, rich debates because these are all very accomplished actors. And so our ideas and our input was good. We were collaborative. We were respectful of each other. I am proud that one of the things I succeeded in doing was changing the nomenclature. My character was continually referred to as a humanoid. And I said, well, that's incredibly insulting. I certainly wouldn't refer to myself in terms of some other species. I said, I am a primate, clearly, and Scott is as a reptilian. They are, by the way, hermaphroditic. So whenever I would say to them, go fuck yourself, it had real meaning. But it was a really fun experience and shoot, and I enjoyed my time that I spent with those fellows. The one regret I have is that midway through the shoot, the makeup was incredibly extensive, and it was right up to the literally right up to the eyelids. And one of my pores became inflamed, and there wasn't time for me to get it medically treated without losing, messing with their schedule. And so I waited until we had wrapped, and then I went to the eye doctors. I had 3 separate procedures, and they were unable to save the tear duct in my left eye.
Oh,
it is chronically clogged now, and so that's a disappointment. I can't really say, gee, I'd do it all again. I'm not sure that I would, because it has created problems in the years since then. But it's one of the downsides. Makeup is a very, very individual thing. Some people take to it like, they love it. It's not a problem. For other people, it is incredibly onerous and oppressive and a real toll.
Wow.
And the men who do it are such consummate professionals. They are incredibly conscientious, and there's no halfway measures. So they say, I'm going to be a background today. Well, we don't know that. The director might change his mind and put you into a close-up. So we're going to do the whole ball of wax. So there were no middling measures. You got your makeup.
Now,
I'm sorry I had to interrupt, but I find that really fascinating because so many of our listeners who are, they tend to learn about the entertainment industry and about the process as well as the art through our show, and for them to think, sometimes what they see is that kind of shiny version that you see in the magazine of, oh, wow, 4 hours in a makeup chair. They don't realize that also can be a downside for the actors, and that's a fascinating turn on.
It is part of the job, and we are well paid. This is not picking cotton. But, there's time for us to have conversations. There's time for us to work on our characters and our lines. But, and as I say, we are very well paid. But it's not the most fun thing, and it's not the most glamorous part of what we do.
Right.
The creative stuff is really the most fun for us.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned you were on. I mentioned it earlier. The Sarah Silverman program several times. Let me just say, I'm so jealous. What was that like? Because Sarah Silverman she's a lightning rod.
She is a very, very special actress. I have yet to see the piece that she's done recently for which she was nominated, but I'm sure she's wonderful in it. She has wonderful sensibility.
And she's also a Star Trek alum like yourself.
She's incredibly bright, and she is such fun. And that sort of came out of nowhere. And I very much enjoyed myself on the show. We had great times, and there was lots of laughter, as you can imagine. The entire cast, these people all know each other. They do stand up together, and they've known each other for decades. So there's a lot of affection and mutual respect and love there. Looking back on it, I wish I had been a little less respectful. There were places I could have gone, and God is. I guess I lack the ego to really take God out there. And what is stunning to me, again, this is a show that aired during the era of the internet. The spleen, the venom, the hatred that was directed towards her, and to some extent towards me, was pretty amazing and impressive to encounter. By and large, my characters have been positive characters for the years. I haven't played that many dark, bad guy heavies. And, people have mixed and varied impressions of the people they watch on film and on TV. And some of the folks realize, well, yeah, they're playing a character, but some folks are not wrapped real tight. And they have trouble differentiating between reality and art and popular culture. And they often respond to the actors that play the characters as the characters. And that can carry its own consequences, trust me.
Oh, I believe you. Wow.
And speaking of being on it just hit me. I haven't looked it up, so I want to see if I remember. And if I do, I'm going to check myself in because I really need to get a life. When you were on Friends, you played the boss that Chandler interviewed with, didn't you?
That's correct.
Oh, my God, that is one of the funniest. At the end, when the whole...
It was such a silly show.
Yeah.
And I was so delighted because there haven't been that many times that I've been a guest star on a show that I really watch regularly. And I had been a watcher of Friends. I remember watching an episode in the first season, maybe 6 or 7 in, and I really feel I saw them coalesce. It was just midway, maybe a third of the way through the show, and suddenly everything clicked. The actors knew who they were. They knew what their relationships were. The writers understood. And in the middle of the show, it just clicked and moved into a higher gear and never looked back. But by the time I was on the show, I think they were all making $1 million an episode. And their biggest problem each day was, which of my cars shall I drive to the lot? And so it was weird. I had met Jennifer when she was a child because her father, John Aniston, and I did a soap together in New York for years. And so to be able to, I look forward to meeting them all, but I didn't really meet the rest of the cast until the day we shot, which was 5 days in, and they were each very gracious to me. But Matthew, I was only guest star in his arc that week, and yet he never learned my name. I was always buddy to him. And I said, okay, he's got other things on his mind, and he generally did. But I enjoyed the experience, but I realized this is a very, this is heightened reality and very rarefied atmosphere. These folks have achieved an incredible amount of success, and they were each, planning the rest of their future and what they were going to be doing next. And so there was not that familial, collegial, theatrical relationship with the guests on their show and the stars as I found in Frasier, for example. It was very compartmentalized.
And you mentioned about your music. Please talk to us about your music and the band that you're in.
I'm not in a band. I've never been in a band.
Oh, I thought you were.
No, I play music with a number of veterans. We have a music night. This is we've only had 3 separate incarnations of it, but we hope to make it a monthly event. Some of them, they're younger by and large, and they grew up in the 80s, and so they play Bruce Springsteen, and they play Journey and things like that. And I've always been drawn to blues from the early part of the 20th century, from the 20s and the 30s and whatnot. And I've been playing it for many years, and I've traveled all over the world, and I've never encountered a single population from Scotland to Romania to Australia to Peru where people don't respond to the blues. It just seems to be a universal form of music that's just enjoyed and appreciated. And because of what I play, which is not that common, people tend to gravitate and want to hear a little bit of what I do. But I don't play in a band. We play each 2 or 3 song sets on this evening of music. I have been involved in the spoken word scene here in Los Angeles for a number of years, and I'll be featured at an event next month on the 10th, and I'll have a half an hour, and I'll read some of my prose, and I'll probably play a couple of songs. It's something that I enjoy doing. I'm grateful that I don't have to make a living doing it because there's so many people that do it so much better, but I enjoy doing it. It's very rare that I'm on a set that I don't have a guitar near me because I found it's just a way to relax my mind and pass time constructively.
Hey, Terry.
That's awesome.
When he was on Millennium, he sang to the people before he euthanized them. Not too creepy.
Yeah, that was the karaoke angel of death. Again, that was a script written by Glenn and Jim. They have very dark comedic sensibilities, and they are very, very adept at incorporating music into their scripts. Wow. It's always very effective. Now, I am no great shakes as a singer, even though I have performed and sung on Broadway and tap danced on Broadway with Gregory Hines, etc. I was shot through the throat. And one of the blessings of having gravitated to country blues is that I don't have to sound like a Broadway baritone. But in this show, I was required to sing a cappella, and I did the best I could. And it's a good thing it wasn't karaoke night or a talent show like He's Got Talent.
Wow. Now, Terry, you guys got I'm taking all the time.
No. Actually, I was going to say. What did you say, Mikey?
Oh, he's doing perfectly fine.
I was going to say, this is lovely. Are you kidding? I do want to make sure. Did we have the altered questions, the ones that?
I can pull them up.
I figured you would.
And I can alter them on the fly.
Okay.
Now, as an actor, I think you'll appreciate what we have. We have our version of what we call the James Lipton questions.
So there are versions. We tweak them. I know you get the giggle out of that. We tweak them for our guests and as you can imagine, because we do tend to be about a Star Trek show, they might slant in that direction.
Well, that's okay. I can still. Okay.
You got it.
So I'll start off with it's a Trek question. What is your favorite Star Trek series?
I've never watched. I didn't watch the originals in original run because I was in the Army then,
Right.
And I didn't. I grew up reading sci-fi, but I didn't grow up. I mean, I watched One Step Beyond and The Twilight Zone, and I guess they are considered sci-fi. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
I've always been attracted to anomalous events. I've been to Area 51.
Would you consider One Step Beyond horror or sci-fi?
Well, yeah, you know more about the genre than I do.
I think I would consider Twilight Zone sci-fi and One Step Beyond more leaning towards the horror. But that's a really
you may well be right.
Yeah.
It wasn't real life documentary type stuff. I did not watch Next Generation. I did not watch Deep Space Nine. I did not watch Voyager until I appeared on it, and then I watched a couple episodes. And I didn't watch Enterprise until I appeared on it. I watch a lot of TV, and I watch a lot of film, but I haven't been drawn, other than Firefly, I haven't been, and Babylon 5. I haven't been a big sci-fi TV fan, but I like the writing on Babylon 5. I love the people in the cast, personally as well as artistically, and I was just very taken with the way the characters in Firefly were drawn, and I felt this is very close to the sensibility that I experienced on Space Above and Beyond. I have a sense of who each of these people are. I give a shit who they are, and I enjoy watching this.
So
and
cool.
Sadly, it did not have a long life either.
Well, Fox did to Firefly what it did to Space Above and Beyond with moving it around.
Yeah.
There's still Terry is one of those people. Go ahead, Terry. Tell them how you are.
I'm what? I'm a bitch? Did I say that?
Yes, but other than that.
Yeah.
If they do something to a show, she'll never watch that in the network again.
Yeah, I don't watch Fox, and to be honest with you, I don't watch sci-fi recently either. So
sometimes I'll do that to a series. If I have a meeting with him and it doesn't work out, screw you, I'm not going to watch it. I'll teach you.
The only one.
I'll show you.
Oh, sure. Great.
Right on.
Nick?
Now, if you were given an opportunity to this is tough because I'm trying to be on a regular on a current series. What series has caught your eye that you would just love to be a regular on?
Oh, I'm at a point in my life now where I really enjoy watching good work, and there's just a lot of it out there. I don't feel covetous about anything. I think I've seen shows where I think, boy, that would just be such a great set to hang out on. Those people are just so. I mean, I felt that way about Deadwood. There's wonderful work being done, and there's so many various outlets now. It's almost impossible to keep up. I enjoy, Better Call Saul. There are a lot of shows I think it would be fun to be on and be around and have those words that I admire so much. But I don't have that kind of ambition. I take the most pleasure these days out of working with emerging artists. A lot of small projects. The film Embers, I did a couple of years ago, has won a number of festivals. It'll be available this fall, and it is a sci-fi film. And I hope you'll look it up, and your fans will get a chance to see it. I was very excited to work with these filmmakers, and that is my idea of fun. People were very generous and kind to me in my my formative days as an actor, and it's a way for me to give back to young emerging talent today. I know how to prepare my work. I know how to be supportive on a set, how to be professional, and sometimes you lead by example. And so, being a positive spirit, being patient, being prepared, being focused, are all things that contribute, and as I say, set a tone.
Now, I'm going to scrap a couple of the questions that we normally ask because they're very Star Trek specific.
Yeah.
But Terry, Janet, and I are of an age where we and we've discussed it on our show. Mike's a little younger.
A little bit behind us, yeah.
He's a little bit behind us. But with your experience, we'd love to get your input on this. We have talked about how we grew up, it was 3 networks and an independent station or 2, and then cable came along, and now you have the networks, the cable stations, Netflix,
streaming services, right?
Hulu, Amazon Prime, all of that. What do you see is the future of broadcast network television series? Because Terry,
each of us having our own series. And when I say each of us, I mean all 9 billion. I don't know what that does for your demographics, but it makes a lot of happy auteurs. The reality is, in the 70s, I had a half-hour show on all 3 networks. I had a public affairs program I hosted on CBS. I had a children's program I co-starred with Jo Beth Williams on ABC called Jabberwocky, and I was doing a soap opera on NBC. So it was, it was a very rich time, and now you have so many options. I think that the advent of technology has led to the democratization of creativity. A young artist today can gain access to equipment that was, economically unthinkable 10, 15, 20 years ago, and yet the technology is available for a relatively small amount of money. They can produce an image that is competitive with anything anyone can create. So it's really more about the ideas and the vision of a young artist today than it is about access or wealth or connections.
And
that's a very encouraging development in my estimation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, people are making
very true.
People are making films on their iPhones.
Yeah.
It's
and they're
crazy.
worth watching, and they might even hold up to being blown up to a 60-foot screen.
Yeah.
Now, what is your view of the phenomenon that's come across in the last few years of the binge watching and the way that they're writing series, understanding that people will now sit down and watch 4 or 5 hours at a time?
Well, it is choices. There's still only 24 hours in a day. Sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. It wasn't that long ago that television set makers started making bigger and better screens, and they became more and more affordable so that people could get the theater experience in their home. And now, if you go to the theater, you've got chairs that recline and people that serve you food and drinks, and you've got the living room experience in the theater. So it's really, I don't know which is the tail and which is the dog.
I never thought of it that way, but you're so right.
But I enjoy, I have a nice big flat screen. I can pause things and tend to my life. I can go and pull a beer out of my fridge. So I'm not inclined to go to a huge sports event and sit, miles from the field. I enjoyed going to college games to see my niece in Ohio State in the band, and I love the atmosphere of these things. But for pure viewing, I'm much more comfortable in my living room watching my flat screen than sitting in a lounge or in a closed environment at the stadium, still watching a flat screen. I remember going to the Hollywood Bowl a couple years ago, and I'm looking at Eddie Izzard, and I love Eddie Izzard, and I realized, Jesus, Eddie's about, he's about 4 inches tall from my seat here, but he's huge on that screen. So I'm watching him on the screen, and I thought, well, how is this different from watching Eddie at home on a screen? I know it's live, but that's academic.
It's true.
That's an intellectual conceit. The reality is I'm watching him on this screen.
All right, I have a question for you when it comes to live theater. When it comes to performance and with your history and with your background, if you were given the opportunity to participate in any role in a play, in a straight play, which play would you choose?
I've already done it. Is this Janet or Terry?
That's Terry.
Oh,
Hi,
it says
Terry.
this is Terry.
I performed a Cormac McCarthy play, the Sunset Limited, for 6 months at my theater company, Rogue Machine, here in Los Angeles. And then I did it again with Joe Spano at the Rubicon Theater in Ventura for another couple months. That's 95 minutes without an intermission of two men in a locked environment.
Wow.
And it's about as intense and demanding as anything I have seen in my 45 years as a professional. And I've done it. And I knew when I closed, if I never do another role, I'm good. I'm satisfied. I'm full.
Wow.
It was incredibly personally satisfying to have done such work so late in my career and in my life that validated the investment that Stella and Sandy made in me. And that's about as good as it gets. I have my bias, but I think stage is the only actor's medium. When the curtain goes up, it's mine. No one can naysay me. It is entirely mine. There will be no editing. There will be no cutting. It is live. And I can hear an idea land in the audience. And I can hear them gasp or laugh or breathe. And that is unique. And that, to me, is the purest form of acting that there is. And so that's what I cherish. I don't have the stamina to do that character anymore. I think we all have to know at some point, I'm not going to stuff a basketball anymore. I'm not going to run for a touchdown. I may hit a golf ball a few hundred yards, but that's about as good as it gets. I've had my day in the sun. I've had a wonderful time, and now I enjoy watching the work of others. And every now and again, if I can lend a hand and support a smaller project because somebody recognizes my name, I'm happy to do it. If there are ideas that I want to be a part of expressing.
Awesome.
That is fantastic.
Guys, I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Likewise.
I hope that you got what you wanted from this.
More than
you can imagine. Thank you
Cannot
so
thank
much.
you enough.
Is there any projects that you'd like to tell our listeners about?
There's nothing that I really want to pimp other than my theater here in Rogue Machine that's doing two incredible plays right now for the Fringe. We're doing Smoke and we are doing Honky, and they're both critically chosen. My theater has gotten more awards than any other small theater out here in the last 6-7 years.
Fantastic.
The film Embers will be available in the fall. It's performing at festivals all over the world, and it's won a number of them. And I think you'll enjoy seeing that when you hear about it. I hope you'll take a look at it.
Certainly.
How about any charities, Tucker? Anything like
Well, the veterans, the Soldiers Project is very, very dear to my heart. It is a civilian initiative, a not-for-profit 501c3. And in a time when we have such wretched publicity from people like Wounded Warriors Project, who has generated hundreds of millions of dollars from well-intended donors and pissed it away irresponsibly in my estimation and immorally in my estimation as well. Projects like the Soldiers Project, which provides free, supportive mental health care for post-9/11 veterans and their families. The care is open-ended, and the care is confidential. That's the most critical aspect. I was diagnosed in 1988 with PTSD. I did really well for 10 years that I described to you, and then when my wheels came off, they really started to circle the drain. And for 7 or 8 years, I was very, very depressed and self-destructive with low self-esteem and very, very guilty that I was alive when so many people I cared about aren't. I see that same dynamic happening right now for the survivors from the wretched events in Orlando. There are people who will question for some time, why was I spared? And they will feel guilt for surviving when people that they love didn't live. They're going to need help. Trauma is trauma, and you need to have it processed in a positive way and in a constructive way. Otherwise, it leads to self-medication and self-destructive behavior and a loss of quality of life. So that's what the Soldiers Project does, and I hope that your listeners will look it up. And
the link will be in our show notes, Tucker.
Well, and I want to thank you for that as an Iraq War veteran with 4 tours over there. I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for my co-host Terry. That is a fact. She saw what I was going through and what was coming, so I know what you're talking about. That
is what it takes. It takes someone who cares enough about you to risk your friendship to say you need.
Oh, she didn't care about that. Trust me.
Stop it.
But in all seriousness, it takes a lot of moral courage on the part of someone who cares for a veteran to reach out to them and say, I see you struggling. I think you're in pain. I think you could benefit from this. Because we are not wired to ask for help. And we are certainly not wired to ask for help from the system, because the system has given us too many unhappy outcomes over the generations. So there are civilian initiatives that are doing good work, and the Soldiers Project is one of them.
Yeah, the words "suck it up and drag on" were said to me more in my career than I ever could imagine. Sir, it has been one of the most extreme pleasures I've had doing this show. We've done over 400 episodes, Mike, if you count the supplemental episodes. And this was totally me just seeing how good a producer Mike really is. To ask him to reach out, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us.
So much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me. Be well all.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tucker Smallwood.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Music for the GNT show is provided by 5 Year Mission, Enterprise Blues Band, Warp 11, Andrew Allen, and Grethor. The GNT show is a BLB production.
Move ahead, walk back to 10. Put a mini skirt on my yo man. Represent the human race. And we make space a happy place. To fully go where no man's gone before. I think I sang that line once before, but I'm not too sure. We'll be so happy, can't you see? A zero-G community. Gonna travel to new worlds. Beam on down and meet some green girls. Gonna see what we can see. A fancy-free galaxy. To boldly go where no man's gone before. I think I sang that line once before, but I'm not too sure. We'll be so happy, can't you see? A zero-G community. Come and take a tour with me. There'll be no cons or Kobe.